right, so I'm just gonna share it from my laptop. Let me know if everyone can see it.
I'm with you. Yes, I'm with you.
All right.
Perfect.
All right, so this is a book review of the memo. And like we said, it's hosted by Greg, myself, and then our amazing guest, Latoya. So the memo, as you most know, is written by Minda Harts. And right here, we just have a little bit about the author. So Minda Harts, she's an assistant professor of public service at NYU's Wagner School, and she's the CEO of career coaching at the memo. So the memo is basically a direct rejoinder to Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, which was written from a white woman's standpoint and leaves out the hardships and unique experiences faced by women of color. So we just have a brief synopsis just for anyone that needs a refresher of the book. So basically some of the things that we talk about in the book is what it's like for women of color women of color in the workplace, building a great work squad, navigating through office politics as a woman of color, dealing with mean girls at work, underpaying women of color, being okay with investing in yourself, replacing self-doubt with positive self-talk, no longer letting stuff slide, saying our names. A lot of times we deal with issues with as far as how our names are spelt or pronounced, the lack of even trying. And the last part of her book is letting go of the only one syndrome. So that's going to be a very interesting point for us to talk about. So this right here is a quote directly from the book and will lead us into the introduction. So the lack of representation in the working world at the highest levels is unacceptable. And let's be clear, it's not because there aren't any successful Black and brown women in business. We just aren't being elevated to the top. And our experiences are not being amplified so that we know we're not alone. We want to read about the experiences of women like us. It's one of the many reasons why writing the memo was important to me. For us, by us. So that leads me to my first thoughts when I read the book. The first thing that Jenny and I talked about was the fact that, wow, we are not alone in a lot of these struggles. And the biggest thing with trauma is, number one, recognizing trauma, realizing that being a woman of color in the workplace can be a very traumatic experience. And secondly is, most victims, they feel that they're alone. So I think this book was important because it showed us that we were not alone at all, when it comes to these struggles. And just the, hearing somebody write, reading it in a book, and the fact that so many of us could relate, just knowing that you're not alone in it and you're able to kind of go through it and heal from the experiences that you face in the workplace.
Yeah, can I just add to that?
Absolutely.
I think it's important to recognize the power of community.
Mm-hmm.
I think none of us live in isolation, and it's important for us to realize that our struggles, our hardships are what they are, but they're not lived by us alone. If I can go through something or you can go through something so that someone else might be better off, then we understand the sacrifice that needs to be made. And I felt like Minda, our author, who's gone through a lot to put together this book, intertwined or interwoven into much of her testimony is this kind of foresight that this would be empowering for other people to see themselves through the experiences, but also now to prepare a new generation to not have to walk some of those hardships and battles that she had to face. I think that's why we're seeing an increase in number of entrepreneurs, especially from our sisters in the recent kind of census statistics.
Latoya, did you want to add a point to that?
It's interesting because at the beginning of the book and at the end of the book, and if anyone has kept up with the author, I would say within the last 6 months when she's done, she has another book out, Right Within, which is like the healing, it's like the step 2 of the memo. It's the healing part of the trauma. And she says, I never wrote this book so that there was going to be a mass exodus of women of color in the workplace. So the balance between feeling valued, seen, and heard, and wanting to stick out the course, I think is it's a great paradox that's explained here in the book as well.
Yeah, that's dope. No, I'm looking forward. We're gonna have to pick up that second edition because I think healing was a topic that has been prevalent in every conversation that we've had, because we recognize the trauma, we recognize the hardship, but we've also recognized the importance of working towards healing. So no, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for bringing that to light.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's hit the next slide.
There we go. So the next slide, she talks about building your work squad. So she has a quote in there, by Sean Diddy Combs: "Tell your friends to get with my friends and we can be friends." And she really brings up the importance of having a team when it comes to, your work squad. She talked about her friend who she called her work wife, and, how she helped her, like, when she went through various issues in the workplace. That was somebody that she was able to confide in, because unfortunately management wasn't always on her side, as being a woman of color. And she also talked about how important it was for you to try to get with literally everybody in the most important areas of your workplace, where, if it's the tech guy, becoming friends with him. So, okay, I have issues with my computer, my email, you can go to him for, any issues. So, not just sticking to one person, but really finding a community within your workplace, and how important that is. So I thought that was a very interesting point to bring up.
Yeah, no, the power of community. That's so important.
So this is just an interesting statistic that we brought up. So according to this report, women in the United States hold 27.8% of board seats at Fortune 500 companies. I told her that women of color hold less than 5% of those seats. She seemed confused when I continued to remind her that she shouldn't say all women when she really meant white women. White people love to make sweeping generalizations about women.
Yeah, it's interesting too, as you go to the next slide. I remember Rachel bringing that up on our last session about how these spaces are occupied less and less by women, but even when you dig deeper, women of color are so underrepresented, but yet carry the brunt of much of the responsibilities that don't go seen. And so it made me think about that conversation that we had last week. Shout out to Rachel Roboshodi of Abyssinian Social Capital. It took me a while to get that, but yeah, but for her witness and experience.
Absolutely. And I do love how she, constantly brings up the fact that when they talk about all women, it isn't always all women. You know what I mean? It is a very important point to make. And sometimes, we shy away from bringing that to the forefront, but it is facts. So the next slide, we talk about, she really talked a lot about dealing with workplace police. And so I just grabbed a quote from the book. "I can't believe what you say because I see what you do." Because oftentimes, I know I experience this a lot in the workplace, and Janet, she said she experienced the same. Oftentimes we will deal with, workplace bullies. But as women of color, the moment you kind of match somebody's energy, if they're being, hostile with you, we're always looked upon as being aggressive. You could literally give the person the same energy right back, but we're always considered to be more aggressive. And it's always a problem when we're dealing with, these conflicts. And oftentimes we will get like kind of condescending responses. If you bring up, especially racism, if you bring that up, it's always like, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? So I think that kind of like makes us take a step back, and we're not able to speak up on a lot of the issues that we face because we are constantly judged about, what our response is.